Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion and Jaw. We're gonna head off to the park like usual because it's supposed to be a roaster today. And then I recently realized that a movie I was blown away by when I was younger has a man who I've heard the name many times and didn't realize that's who it was. So we're gonna go find out about him today. We're gonna head out to the San Fernando Mission Cemetery. When I was younger, I used to go to the public library during the summer because that was before the days of the internet and you just couldn't get things readily available other than going to a video store and renting videos. So I would go there and you could actually rent tons of stuff there. They had tons of videos and books and CDs and everything. And I remember when I was probably, I think I was going into 8th grade, I didn't really have anything in mind to rent and I saw Roots. They had like the entire collection of Roots, so I got, you know, the very first video, started watching it, and it was just a captivating series. Well acted. I was already a Good Times fan, so when I saw John Amos was in it, I was like, okay, this is gonna be, you know, I should check this out. And then it just had so much significance when you watch the movie. But there's always been one guy, like one of the bad guys I would consider in the movie that's always stuck out in my head. And I found out on this past weekend as I was talking to somebody that was Chuck Connors. And I had always heard the name Chuck Connors from being the Rifleman, but I had no idea that was him in Roots. So that got me interested and I wanted to read up more about him and find out more about him. And that's what inspired today's vlog. So we're actually gonna go out and see the grave of Chuck Connors, the Rifleman. And I actually haven't been out to this part of the cemetery in quite a while, but one of my biggest influences when I saw La Bamba when I think I was a freshman in high school, just became a big fan of that, and that's actually what inspired me to go out and get a guitar and learn how to play guitar. And Richie Valens is the focus of La Bamba, and he's buried at the cemetery as well, so when we go out there we'll probably stop and see Richie Valens as well. Now kind of what ended up bringing up Chuck Connors in conversation, because it's not somebody that you normally, I guess, comes up every day in conversation, was I was talking to somebody and they were telling me about legendary smokers. And I had heard when I was younger that Jackie Gleason used to smoke like 7 packs of cigarettes a day. And I mentioned that to somebody and they said, oh yeah, for like 10 years Chuck Connors said he smoked like 3 packs a day, which is eventually what ended up killing him much later on. So I guess technically the last time that we were out at this cemetery was, that's where Bob Hope's buried. And I knew that he was buried there, but what I didn't know was that if you go to the San Fernando Mission, which is where we went that day, that's the only way you can get to Bob Hope's gravesite. Even though it's technically in the Mission Cemetery, they have a gate and it's locked up. So when you're in the cemetery and you get to the point where you can see Bob Hope's grave, you actually can't enter through there. So if you're ever looking to go to the cemetery and you want to see Bob Hope, you actually have to go to the mission itself. You have to pay, I think, $5 donation, and then you go all the way through the mission, all the way to the back, and there's actually a Bob Hope garden with a big portrait of him on the wall, and then you follow that garden even further back and you'll find the grave of the great comedian who lived to be 100 years old, Bob Hope.
The Rifleman. Starring Chuck Connors.
Okay, we're heading to the valley. Just can't come here and see this without thinking of the part in La Bamba where Richie Valens is being laid to rest here. Well, we're gonna come out here and visit Chuck Connors now. And here he is. Now you might notice when you're looking here at the headstone, you see a picture of him as the Rifleman. You also see a Chicago Cubs logo, Boston Celtics logo, a Dodgers logo. So let me tell you why. Chuck Connors actually wanted to be an athlete. From the time he was born and raised in Brooklyn, he was such a great baseball and basketball player that he actually got a scholarship to a private high school, then a scholarship to Seton Hall, And that's actually where the nickname came in. See, he hated his name Kevin Connors, which is surprising because he ends up naming one of his sons Kevin Connors later on in life. But he was trying to find a different name. He just never liked that one. And while he was at Seton Hall, he used to always say, "Chuck the ball to me, chuck it to me. Here, baby, chuck it to me." And that's how the name came about. He became Chuck Connors. He first was a giant Dodgers fan growing up in Brooklyn, so he wanted to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he got that chance. Right out of college, he got to play 4 games for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and then, well, their farm system anyway, and then was sent over to the New York Yankees farm system, played a few games for there, and then actually enlisted in the Army. So he was actually playing baseball, was in the Army, and at the same time became a Boston Celtic. Now, like I said, that's crazy. While he was at Seton Hall, he actually had a scholarship for baseball, but he was playing both baseball and basketball at that time, and the Celtics were a new team, and so Chuck Connors ended up playing for the Celtics in the 40s. And what's crazy about that is he is credited as being the very first player in basketball to break a backboard, to shatter a glass backboard. Now, it's not how you're probably thinking. It's not that he was dunking on it and hanging on the rim. He actually took a shot, it hit the front of the rim, and I guess the rim had been installed wrong or improperly, and that's what ended up breaking it. So he was playing baseball and basketball professionally at the same time. One of only, a dozen people to ever do that, to play professional baseball and basketball, but he wasn't that great of a baseball player. I mean, as far as the major league criteria and what you just had to, what your batting average and everything had to be, he was a first baseman and pinch hitter, and never really had over like a 230 average for the most part. So he played a few games for those Dodgers and then was traded off to the Cubs and spent most of his time in their farm system. Now, that's kind of how his acting career started. You see, he ended up during the off season one year. He had been traded over to the Cubs, like I said, and the Cubs had demoted him down to what was their best AAA team, their number one farm system team, which was at the time called the Los Angeles Angels. So at the time, a big casting agent was a big fan of the Angels, loved Chuck Connors, and had him audition and gave him a part in a Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn movie called Pat and Mike. And that's kind of what started it all, because Chuck Connors eventually, he made like 12 grand off that movie, which was like double, they said, what he was making playing baseball. So he played another season of baseball and then just started devoting his life to trying to be an actor. He did, a few bit parts here and there, making guest appearances and things, and then eventually they said beat out I want to say 40 or 50 actors to become the Rifleman. And the Rifleman was a series that lasted for 5 years, and he played he was a widowed father with a son, and that was what the show was about. He had this custom rifle, and it was basically following around the life of him and his son. He played Lucas McCain, and pretty much went down in history being known for that for the most part.
Mark suddenly needs a new pair of boots, shirt, pants, and what else?
A belt?
Imagine that, wore out everything all at once.
Looks like it's shopping day for just about everybody in the territory.
He, been giving you any trouble?
Oh, turned in about 10 last night. Paid at Lou's, walked polite and quiet, rode the country for a while, and now he's back at Sweeney's.
Paula, can I?
Can you what?
Take a look.
All right, stick your head in, but you meet me back at Lou's later.
Thanks.
Now, part of how Chuck Connors ended up becoming the Rifleman was because he had given a really great performance in Walt Disney's Old Yeller. And, I mean, I saw Old Yeller when I was a kid, and I never forgot that. What a sad movie that was, but that's how he became the Rifleman. Now, his history is really incredible, I think, because even though he became a big actor and a big superstar and widely known for this, he actually kept his hand in the baseball scene, because in the 60s, when there was basically like a holdout for the players. Between Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale, they were kind of holding out playing. He became a mediator. He actually stepped in and became a mediator to help them get past all that. And he also was kind of well known for being a staunch Republican. He used to do fundraisers for Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, and they said that through Richard Nixon he actually met the Soviet leader back in the 70s, and because of that, Chuck Connors was one of the only people to have his television show broadcast in Russia. The Rifleman was one of the only shows that you were allowed to see in Russia in those days. How crazy is that? Now Chuck was married actually 3 times, and it's kind of interesting how he ends up meeting all of his wives. I kind of think it tells you a little bit about him. His first wife was a fan that used to come to his baseball games, and so he was married to her for like 15 years and had 4 kids. And then he ended up falling in love with one of his co-stars in Geronimo. He married her for 10 years. And then, after they divorced, he fell in love with another co-star for Soylent Green and was married to her for 2 years. So it's kind of interesting that he almost was a man of habit. You know, if he was single and he was around somebody for a long time, it sounds like, you know, he just fell in love. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this vlog, heavy smoker. He smoked for, like, they said off and on, pretty heavy for 12 years, and then after he quit he would occasionally go back to it and eventually ended up dying of pneumonia and lung cancer at the, you can tell right here, in 1992. So he wasn't all that old really. I mean, barely 70 years old. But I saw him, you know, what I remember him from and didn't know that it was the Rifleman playing that part was his part in Roots. So if you've never seen Roots, I highly recommend you check that out. But what a career, huh? I mean, guy played 2 professional sports, one of only like 12 people to ever do it. He helped broker baseball deals. He was friends with presidents. I mean, and he even founded a charitable foundation where he would hold golf tournaments every year to raise money for the foundation. So overall, just a real good guy, it sounds like. Or it sounds like at least a decent guy.
We cut for the privilege of gunning you. All nice and legal, you understand.
You win or lose.
Well, now that depends on which side you think I'm on.
Well, then you better turn around before they put a bullet in your back. What do you think, Billy?
I think the deck's been stacked.
Mac can take the badge.
Can you take Draco?
Do you think
McCain's as good as his reputation.
He's thinking, Johnny. He's done with thinking, Lucas. Now he's measuring the odds.
And if you're like me and have a sense of humor, when I was reading about him, the first thing I thought was, what's the matter, Chuck? No interest in football? Until I started looking further and found out that, in fact, he was drafted by the Chicago Bears. He was, in fact, officially a Chicago Bear. He just never suited up, never played or anything. Fantastic. What a career, huh? The Rifleman ended up lasting for 5 seasons and 168 episodes. And it was actually one of the only shows of the day to have a single father or widowed father taking care of his son as the basis of the show. Whenever I come to this cemetery, I always like to check out the statues because it's a Catholic cemetery and they always really have some great ones. This is the statue of St. Elizabeth of Hungary. Feast day. Now here's another one we have to take a look at. This one, the details on it are just absolutely incredible. Look what he's holding. And you've got that glowing heart. Isn't that amazing? And it actually looks like that right at the base of this, they have a couple of sisters buried here. It's a society devoted to the Sacred Heart. If you were a fan of the Rifleman, you might be interested to know that Chuck Connors and Johnny Crawford stayed friends until the day he died. That was his son on the show. And I have to take a look at this one. This is like the biggest one in the whole cemetery. Crucifixion. This one's actually larger than life size. We didn't go to Richie Valens' grave today because a funeral started there as I was there, and all the cars started lining up right in that section, so I didn't want to be disrespectful, so we'll see it another time. Now, Chuck Connors was actually so good in Roots that he was nominated for an Oscar. And for a long, long time, Roots was the quintessential miniseries, probably the most popular miniseries of all time. So if you've never seen Roots, you should definitely take the time to sit and watch it. It's a very, very powerful movie. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for watching. Have a great night, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.